Alrighty, so week 15 just finished for the work that we had. I graded the Learn Together that were submitted. And I think the best example of somebody adding functionality was actually Adam. Adam did a really nice job in doing a drop down. He ended up hitting the user endpoint. So when we say endpoint, that means that the URL that we're provided, that is the API, the endpoint is that entire URL. So then, the more, and by the way, the more you learn about APIs, you realize how different they all are, because think about it, every one of those APIs was created by different developers, most likely. They had a different intention about what kind of functionality they would give. Anyway, so Adam did a drop down of the users, did it manually. We talked about how to do it dynamically today. And then based on the user drop down the selection, then outputted some information. I thought that was a really good example. So some of you just adding a button, I would say, is almost not functionality. Because when we think about functionality, we think about it from the user. What can we give the user? The user is going to expect more than just a button, right? Because they're just going to expect the data to be there. And then they would want some added functionality that will make their lives better. A button wouldn't be it. So I should have been more clear, but when I say functionality, that's what I mean. The one thing I realized too is that I hadn't posted mine. I guess I just got busy, and that's not, I mean, it's an excuse, yes. The other thing is I'm working on next semester. Again, not an excuse, but it's getting a lot of my attention, which kind of makes sense given where we're at. So I thought what I'd do here is start with showing you, like for mine, and I wouldn't even say this is that great. I think Adam's is better as well. But where I just said, how many did you want to get, right? Like, and just listed them out. That's better than a button, but not a lot. Like 75, you can't even see them until you scroll down. What would have been, I think, better is actually to do a pagination. Pagination meaning, and you've seen this, where you get a long list of items and it show the next 10, like it gives you the ability to input. And I'm pointing over here like this is where it would be. It could be in the middle, it doesn't matter. But I'm just thinking of where I've seen them would be a good way to do that. So just think about that, right? So if you did a button minimum, do something more next week. And if you did something more, then all you need to do next week is actually our last topic, which is to convert them, refactor that code using, you can do it with fetch to get the API, and then the callbacks. So instead of the XML HTTP request, what a mouthful, you do fetch and use call instead of callbacks, which are still callbacks. Async await is just a callback. Okay. So in this process, of course, you're learning promises. So I really like learning it though through this, because it's really more like it's more code. So this using fetch and using async await is what we call an abstraction. It abstracts from you what's really going on, which many times is good, but sometimes when you want to dig into what happens, it's good that you have an understanding, because it's still doing the same basic functionality, but we're calling it a refactor because you're doing it with a new paradigm, a new design pattern, you could say. But when you think of a promise, right, you have a promise, you call some, you usually, in this case, we're using API, but there's different ways to implement promises besides through calling API endpoints. But you either resolve that promise, then you then, like I promise to do this, then, do this work. And this is a way to actually handle error checking, or handling errors is just when I get a reject, right? Catch would be if I have a reject path. So really good to learn this here at the end. And I posted out on Discord again because of a conversation Adam and I had with some APIs for those of you that are considering the API option for Dev 2. But what we did is we went through and looked at it, and several of them were broken. And so here's the thing: if you're going to use this list, right, like this one, CapFacts, this was a perfect example. I said, well, let's go look at this one. And then there's go to the API docs. And then we actually tried to hit the API endpoint, right, which was where it gets started, visit, right. Oh, actually getting started developing. Actually, that's where it was right here. And when we tried to hit this, it was first thing I noticed was the Heroku. Well, Heroku's had some changes this last couple of days, actually. I think they were bought by Salesforce, I want to say. So now they no longer have a free level like they used to have. But that's one thing you'll need to check out. And some of them required an API key. Now, this one didn't. So if you're going to use that list, you need to go through and see if you can actually get one that worked. I think after 3 or 4, the one that we got to work was for the Open Movie database, but you had to get an API key. Okay. Again, this is free. I don't want you to pay for it, right? So FYI. Okay, so why did I talk about all this? This is our last topic, right? This is our last learn together. I wanted to show you my code. Next week, if you added just a button, add something else, add some other kind of functionality and change it to here. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about that. We've talked about the end of semester schedule, but I just want to remind us all where we're at, right? So after next week, right, December 1st, that code is due. The sign up schedule was released last week in week 15. So in case you didn't see it, but several of you did because I saw you sign up. So thanks for that. And that is very helpful. Okay, so what else was there? I think that was it. Actually, let's go back and look because what I do typically is I go look and think about the stuff that I want to talk about for this week. And for week 16, I think I've nailed all the items I wanted, but it's always a good review. End of semester. Oh, yeah, the what if. Oh, see, I'm glad I did this. Do you know? Because one of the things that happens to us during this part of the semester is students start saying, what do I need to do to pass your class, right? So you can do in grade. Now I can't see it because of my particular view. Actually, I can here if I go to student view and then I go to grades. These obviously are not going to make sense, but you can come in here and you can modify it. You can ask the what if questions. What if I do late work? Remember, it's 75% maximum percentage you'll get for that work, right? What if I do, how well do I have to do on Dev 2 to get whatever grade I'm hoping to get out of this class, right? So that what if is really helpful. And I hope you, if you don't already know about it, you start using it to answer that question for yourself. Okay. So that's good. I want to make sure you know that. The other thing I want to say is if you, a couple things here. I'm not going to show that. That was crazy. See, that's why if I don't move into the student view, I go in there, see everybody's grade, which I don't want to do. But the other thing is at this point, if you did an alternative for, and this is not here, but it's reminding me for dev work, let me say it here. If you did the alternative for Dev 1, then you need to make sure you're connecting in with me soon, like this week, for what you're going to do for Dev 2. Many of you, what I said, and I still would hold to this, but I'm also open to a conversation about this, is like I would want you to do Dev 1, the requirements originally that I laid out, but it'd still be worth, right, a little bit less. Just because I know the progression of skills that I want demonstrated through this class are relatively substantial. So, but I'm also trying to be flexible and figure out how to meet students where they're at. So that's why I'm doing it. But I would need to hear from you because I want to make sure you and I are on the same page about what that's going to look like for you. So here's what I would say is if you did an alternative for Dev 1, make sure you either email me this week or come see me during office hours and let's talk about what your Dev 2 is going to look like. Okay, so please do that. And the other thing I would say is like last week, some of you, everyone who did attendance last week gave me feedback, and I very much appreciate it. Just know I am constantly trying to figure out how to do better. As I think we all are in life, I think we should all be trying to do better all the time. And there's always room for improvement. And God knows that's true with what I am trying to do in the world, which is to give you real world skills. And what that means is it definitely requires a certain amount of effort. And so, by that nature, there are going to be less students that will get to that end point, which is obviously not the goal we have. But we also want to give them I want to give them, we want to give them as a community college skills that they can take to the marketplace. But not everybody is here for that kind of skill base. Anyway, always a challenge. So I just wanted to thank you for those of you that gave me that feedback last week. Very much appreciate it. And I think that is it for me. Thanks for next semester. I talked about that last time. Node.js is still in a question mark because of enrollment. So if you were considering it, boy, this would be the coming week to do it. Otherwise, I think it unfortunately might get canceled. I hope not, but there's a possibility of that. Okay, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.